It's not difficult to accept that we live in the age of the greater and better, and by and large that is valid. Be that as it may, one thing you can't limit is history's capacity to overpower us when we wouldn't dare hoping anymore. From the synthetic to the regular, these photographs catch the embodiment of feeling unimportant. Dr. George Frederick Bahnsen was a man of numerous abilities. He was quite possibly the most acclaimed clinical diagnostician in his time. He filled in as a Union sharpshooter in the Civil War. And he developed the greatest lily cushions the U.S. had ever seen. The photograph above is a strange underwriting for the capability of any man with a humble green thumb and a teaspoonful of craziness. In his years after the war, Bahnsen and his significant other worked energetically to develop the Victoria regal water lily, an Amazonian species known to arrive at widths of over 2.5 meters (8 feet) in nature. The Bahnsen pair turned into the primary individuals to develop it in the U.S. without the assistance of a nursery. The lake that housed this odd little piece of history was subsequently depleted to clear a path for the Salem College Fine Arts Center. By the 1940s, Antarctic investigation insanity was arriving at a breaking point. Filled by the endeavors of Shackleton, Falcon, and Charcot, the world watched with breath held and fingers strained as each new group fashioned a way through the frozen southern squanders, with an end goal to stay aware of the soul of disclosure. New and better innovations were moving off the sequential construction systems to help these gallant men better adapt to the components. One of these developments was the Antarctic Snow Cruiser. Planned by Dr. Thomas C. Poulter, an Antarctic veteran with a lung harm to demonstrate it, the cruiser should be the embodiment of investigation innovation. It had extraordinarily planned treadless tires that should have the option to connect the wide precipices that had forestalled past pilgrims from utilizing vehicles after long periods of advancement. The cruiser contacted Antarctic ice unexpectedly on January 15, 1940, at the Bay of Whales. For a brief and wonderful second, it roosted on the permafrost like a furious metal penguin. And afterward, the enormous tires got through the day off spun out. The team uncovered it just to have the motors overheat 200 or 300 meters farther in. In this manner started the most disappointing months people have ever experienced in Antarctica. Eventually, the Endeavour chose to just cover the snow cruiser with lumber and use it as a celebrated tent. It was deserted when the group left Antarctica early the following year. The overall agreement on lobsters is that they're too enormous to fit on a supper plate, however not exactly. At a scholarly level, we understand that they get much greater than the ones at the supermarket, yet this photograph pounds that understanding home with instinctive eagerness. Albeit these aren't the biggest lobsters on record, that differentiation goes to a monster got off Nova Scotia that tipped the scales at 20 kilograms, 44 pounds. Every one of their paws is greater than the kid's middle. Giving one more contention for avoiding New Jersey's water, the American Northeast is no more odd to mauled monsters of the profound. The development of the American lobster industry resembled the appearance of canning innovation in North America, and by the center of the 19th century, interest for lobsters was soaring. Supply immediately rose to fulfill that need direct. The Upper East got so immersed with lobster meat that it came to be viewed as helpless man's food. That's clearly changed at this point. In spite of the fact that lobster fisheries the world over still draw in more than 200,000 tons of this specific decapodian delicacy consistently. This photograph from the development of Mount Rushmore was taken in the last part of the 30s, only a very long time before the landmarks finishing in 1941. The task was totally colossal in degree, particularly thinking about that it was based closely following the Great Depression, like ants on an activity figure. Laborers went through 14 years sticking to the nostrils and eyebrows of America's most prominent presidents, utilizing steel links and huge winches housed in structures at the highest point of the mountain. 30 minutes. Some random time originally shot at that point cut the landmark out of Rushmore's stone face. Explosive charges cut out a highlights to inside 8 centimeters 3 in. After which laborers hand-cut the rest with what got known as the honeycomb technique. Utilizing drills, laborers drilled a progression of firmly separated openings, which were then thumped away with a chisel. The just individual who passed on during the development of Mount Rushmore was its modeler, Gutzon Borglum, who kicked the bucket of normal causes a half-year before it was done. Much obliged to some extent to the Hindenburg, the early, hydrogen-filled Zeppelins are presently inseparable from flaring misfortune. In World War I, 84 Zeppelins were worked for the German wartime exertion. 60 of them were annihilated. And about portion of those misfortunes weren't even from adversary fire. They were simply accidents and the outcome of the different bombarding attacks that never appeared to do a lot of harm. European open fields turned out to be off-the-cuff grave locales for the wore-out cadavers of these gigantic airborne leviathans. The photograph above was taken in Meissen, France in 1918. Our nearest current comparable to these huge scope wreckages would presumably be submerged wrecks. However, even those infrequently approached the size of the biggest carriers of the period. The most seasoned living Goliath sequoia monster redwood on record was 3,500 years of age. It was mature dependent on its trunk rings, so it needed to bite the dust to get the record. The monster redwoods of California, a notable picture of Americana. Close to so much so as the armadas of trucks burdened by redwood logs bigger than the actual trucks. A solitary truck could convey 16,500 meters, 54,000 feet of sheets and crude lumber. Prior to the California dash for unheard of wealth of 1850, California's redwood forests were flawless and immaculate. From that point forward, more than 95% of the old development timberland has been cut for lumber. The woods from which these trees came had been around for such a long time that they'd shaped a transformative beneficial interaction with the out-of-control fires that have truly moved through California. The redwood's bark is exceptionally fireproof, so it takes negligible harm while contending species are totally cleared out. Indeed, even a picture of 3-meter wide, 10 feet redwood logs stacked on a truck doesn't drive in the sheer size of these enormous trees like this photograph taken at ground zero of the felling of the imprint. Twain redwood in 1891. This was an illustration of a prize tree, a tree cut down as an outflow of pioneers' triumph over the primitive scene of the American West. A ton of those photographs advanced into period postcards. Generally with men with tomahawks expecting to be easy-going, not a problem poses, since Goliath sequoias were inclined to breaking when they fell. The lumberjacks who brought down Mark Twain went through 8 days burrowing a channel that they fixed with quills to keep the tree unblemished when it collided with the ground. 2 cross areas from the base were cut out to go to galleries, and the rest was separated for fence posts. This stone curving cutting-edge rock is surely huge, amazing, possibly, however not really stunning. What's unbelievable about it, however, is the means by which something so enormous and apparently slight could in any case be remaining after almost 1,500 years, identified just as a Roman scaffold over the Wadi al-Mur by its picture taker. Prehistorian Max von Oppenheim, it was likely worked during the rule of Roman ruler Justinian I. The Wadi al-Mur is a stream going through the Ninawa province of northern Iraq, simply under the boundary of current Turkey. In the 6th century, Justinian constructed a progression of scaffolds and dams in that area to forestall flooding in the Mesopotamian city of Dara, while the greater part of those designs were emphatically more amazing. This solitary curve is one of only a handful few leftover complete constructions from the Roman control of Iraq. Also, starting at 2006, it was all the while standing. cabbages more extensive than a work cart, pumpkins so substantial they break down under their own weight. There's something delicately haughty about monster vegetables, as though they're utilizing space that shouldn't be theirs. In the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, next somewhere down in the land of the midnight sun, Goliath vegetables are a legacy, one savagely insured by its occupant, farmers. The Alaska State Fair is the place where the goings-on get happy, and it's there that you'll locate the 210-centimeter, 89-inch gourds, the 500-kilogram, 1,100 pounds pumpkins, and the biggest cabbages on the planet. For what reason do they get so large? A ton of it comes down to geology. Since that piece of Alaska gets upward of 20 hours of daylight each day in the late spring, vegetables simply kind of continue shipping, benefiting from the interminable first light of the Alaskan soul. In a world stuffed with hardware and robotization, the effect of sheer labor is frequently neglected for a more innovative methodology. It's difficult to accept. Yet the apparently disorderly wooden platform and hive-like labor force in the photograph above was only a piece of the deliberately arranged development of the biggest brickwork dam in the world, located on the Krishna River in India. The Nagarjunasagar Dam traverses 1.6 kilometers 1 mile, stands 150 meters 490 feet tall, and the supply it makes is one of the world's biggest man-made lakes, and every last bit of it was worked with human work. The dam is viewed as the first of India's cutting-edge sanctuaries, structures intended to decrease India's reliance on imported products, and a lot of individuals can be pleased with that. In its 12 years of development, there were never less than 50,000 individuals chipping away at it at some random time.